Hey guys, welcome back to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles! Resolve. In the last episode, we started the dance of deduction, which I can't wait for. So, without further ado, let's just get into it.
Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate's room last night. Foam at the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate which contains, you will observe, one half of a sizable bar of soap. Meaningful? Indubitably. Why is this soap yet so purposefully upon the dish, like the victim's last supper in fact? Yes. Could it be the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer. It appears that the young man's appetite was his undoing. Taking up arms in the form of cutlery, the victim engaged in a deadly battle for his life. Yet the struggle against his hunger was in vain, for in the end, he couldn't resist devouring the slippery feast. But London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate. The soap and the lather about the young man's mouth are too perfectly matched to ignore. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to excessive ingestion of foul soap. Though personally, I have a greater interest in the taste of foul candle wax, of course.
Cause of death, and the conclusion is poisoning from soap ingestion. Topic 2. Suicide or murder?
The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall that death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? This single teacup suggests the answer. To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. The careful criminal could have absconded with his own cup to cover his tracks. Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock. Though forced open now, at the time of the incident, this door was locked. And the sole key was in the victim's pocket. In other words, when the victim consumed the poison, he must have been alone. Alone with his inferior soap, from whence wafted an inferior scent. And with that acrid aroma lingering in the air, the victim met his end in tragic solitude. We can take comfort only in the fact that his soul was well cleansed on its way to the hereafter.
Conclusion? No possible perpetrator present.
This concludes the final act of Sherlock Holmes' Great Deduction.
There's just one thing, Mr. Holmes.
You are disposed to identifying just one thing, aren't you, Mr. Naruhodo? Pray, what concerns you?
Well, no matter how hungry he was, do you really think the man would have eaten soap?
It is quite apparent that this man had barely any penny to his name. It is a curious thing, but to one so destitute, soap can suddenly appear quite irresistibly appetizing.
How extraordinary!
In truth, I have tried a little soap myself in the past.
You've eaten it, you mean?
My dear fellow, it was some time ago now. My postulation was that it would cleanse my gut.
And did it?
As I writhed in agony on the floor and spilt the contents of my stomach, yes, I believe it did. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Soap is quite poisonous. It has an unpleasant taste and leads to great discomfort. In summary, I cannot recommend it.
Believe me, I wouldn't eat it, even if you did. There's something that troubles me as well, actually. Oh, what's that? It's Mr. Natsume. Oh! I couldn't help noticing you shuddering and quivering out of the corner of my eye. Almost as if Mr. Shaw's deduction touched a nerve somehow. Nonsense. Well, that clenched teeth episode didn't last. I think, judging by Mr. Natsume's reaction, the great detective's deductions may need some gentle corrections in order to reach the actual truth. Yes, Mr. Sholmes' observations and deductions are sometimes a little too sharp. He has a tendency to hit the nail on the side of the head and drive it into an obtuse angle. When he does that, it falls to us to straighten things out. Alright then, let's see what we can do. Yes, we must pick out the keywords in Mr. Sholmes' quite brilliant deductions, and discreetly exchange them for something that makes a little more sense. If we can do that, I'm sure we'll arrive at what Mr. Sholmes meant to say in the first place.
In that case, are you ready for the second performance of the day? Once again, my dear fellows, for your continued delight and wonder, let the curtain rise. For Sherlock Sholmes' Logic and Reasoning Spectacular, Act 1.
Yeah, let's go! Let's go! Course correction. Hold it, Mr. Sholmes. Topic 1. Cause of death. Poisoning from soap ingestion?
Careful observation of the victim reveals to us the events that transpired in this disconsolate room last night. Foam of the mouth of the deceased clearly indicates the use of poison. Next to the victim, we notice a large dining plate which contains, you will observe, one half of a sizable bar of soap, meaningful, indubitably. Why is the soap set so purposefully upon the dish, like the victim's last supper, in fact? Yes. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the fork reveals the answer.
Well, you can't deny that a fork implies the man was eating something or about to eat something. Yes, that's true. If I were to decide to eat some soap, I should prefer to use a fork than to attempt it with chopsticks. And of course, only half of the bar of soap is left on the plate. But might there not be some other explanation? Something material that proves whether or not the man really ate some soap? Well, we are going to find out. Do you think he was drinking tea with his soap? The cup's empty, so there's no way of knowing. How about this for an idea? Perhaps the cup was full of water, and he was dissolving soap in it so he could gulp as much down as possible. Please remember that he may not actually have been the soap lover that he's been made out to be. That is true. That is very true. We can't look at the... Let's have a look at the fork. I suppose you'd eat soap with a fork, would you? I don't think it's a question of which implement you'd use. You shouldn't eat soap full stop. But then why? Why does the man have a fork in his hand? Oh dear, I understand your frustration, Mr. Naruto, but please don't take it out on me. The point is, if we decide the man used his fork to eat the soap, we wouldn't be changing Mr. Sholmes' deduction. So we really ought to consider some other clues. We are going to. Can we have a look at the hat? Other piece of soap. Look, there's some more soap on the floor here. Mr. Shamsby must really have loved this stuff. Let's not jump to conclusions, Mr. Naruto. Look closely at the soap. Do you see that it would fit together perfectly with the half bar on the table? What the... How can that be? I think that they are two halves of the same bar that broke apart. Aha! Is there anything else? So, that doesn't seem to be anything else we can have a look at. Can we? No, that doesn't seem to be anything else. So, we're just gonna present this then.
Take that!
Other piece of soap. Could it be that the man was about to eat it? Of course, the other piece of soap reveals the answer.
It being the other half of the soap on the table, in short, the victim was not eating soap at all. But it's obvious, really, for no depths of hunger could drive any man to attempt to eat soap. Even I, with my unquenchable thirst for practical knowledge, took only a single bite.
But that begs the question of how the man was poisoned, because there's no sign of any food on the table.
An excellent observation, Mr. Naruhodo, and one that furnishes us with the answers we seek. For London's foul soap is besmirched by foul poison. Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the contents of the plate.
Mr. Sholmes is still pushing the soap argument then. Perhaps he's suggesting the man licked the soap rather than ate it. If soap is in London is that poisonous, I don't think I want to be washing my hands with it. But there are no signs of any food in this room at all. Of course, food isn't the only thing that passes people's lips, is it? Well, that is true. That is true. Let's have another look at the fork. Can we jump across this? No, we can't. So if the victim didn't eat the soap, then what did he eat? Yes, it's a real mystery, isn't it? Ah, I've got it. He wasn't interested in eating the soap at all. It was the fork he wanted to satisfy his hunger with. Mr. Naruhodo, I really don't think it's helpful to continue with this line of reasoning that the gentleman had peculiar tastes. Susato-san has such a gentle way with words, but I know when I've been told off. Yes, for sure. Okay, so there's nothing of interest here. That's still the fork. Let's have a look at the contents of the plate. The contents of the plate is just the soap again, isn't it? Well, you know there's a saying in Japanese, don't you? If your food is poisoned, you might as well eat it plate and all. Well, there's an image. All I can picture now is the victim first taking a bite of the soap and then the plate. The soap like some tofu and the plate like a giant rice cracker. Oh dear, that sounds like a very bland combination. What about the teacup? Yes, a Western vessel for the serving of infusion of dried tea leaves. It's a teacup, Mr. Naruhodo, as you well know. Stop putting on airs. And it's empty. Ah, so we've already established that the victim wasn't eating soap when he died. However, there's significant evidence to suggest that he was drinking tea. My thoughts exactly. Can we still check out anything else though? Doesn't seem like it. So we're gonna present the teacup then.
Take that!
Yes, the victim's life was claimed by poison that tainted the teacup.
Indeed, cups have been vessel of choice for practicing poisonous over the centuries. And it would appear that this victim drank every last drop.
There's no sign of blood anywhere in the room, food anywhere in the room.
Which leads us to the immutable conclusion. The cause of death was clearly intoxication due to the ingestion of poison contained in this teacup.
So the conclusion is poison in the tea. Solved. Is it suicide or murder?
The cause of death identified, we proceed to Act 2, where we ponder the next question. Was this suicide or murder? The audience will recall the death occurred during the victim's last supper. Did the man dine and die alone? This single teacup suggests the answer.
The Western vessel for infused hot drinks again. It's already featured heavily in our deductions so far. Yes, we can imagine that shortly before his death, Mr. Shamspeare was having a drink of tea. There would be nothing remarkable about that, but what troubles me is Mr. Natsume's reaction when he heard Mr. Sholmes suggested. There's more to this deduction than it seems. We must closely examine the scene of the crime again for some more clues. And we are going to. So, we do have the other teacup already here. So, can we check out anything else? Doesn't seem like it. But we are for the purpose of being thorough. We are going to look at things. The fork again? The victim just seems to be holding it so pointedly. It makes it impossible to let go of the idea that it must be involved somehow. Well, let's hope it turns out to be a useful clue in the end. Aha! So that means it's going to be a useful clue in the end. So the single teacup? It's empty and it's the only cup on the table. It would appear so, yes. And when you consider those facts, Mr. Sholmes' reasoning seems highly logical. But it's always the same in these deductions. The real truth is always buried a little deeper than the great detective suggests. Mr. Naruhodo, you seem very dubious of Mr. Sholmes all of a sudden. Well, there's a reason for that, Susato-san. Because he overlooked this, the other teacup. It's another Western form. It's a teacup! It's a teacup! And it too is empty. Given that he's actually holding this one in his hand, we can assume that this is the cup from which Mr. Shamsby was actually drinking. But if that's the case, this changes everything. Everything we've deduced up to now is turned on its head. I have a bad feeling about this. I almost don't want to say it. Yes, I know exactly how you feel. Well, let's present it though. The other teacup. Did the man dine and die alone? This other teacup suggests the answer. Yes, there were two teacups in this room all along. Oh! In other words, this is a strong indication that at the victim's last supper, there was a guest present.
At the very least, we can say now with certainty that somebody else was here in the room last night taking tea with the victim.
What are you talking about? Utterly unbelievable and just unreasonable!
To draw a conclusion on such meager evidence would be foolish, however, certainly. In which case, what more can we deduce about this possible guest at the table? Well, allow me to lift the veil of doubt, my dear fellow.
Do you mean to say you know who exactly was in this room at the time of the victim's death?
Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the broken lock.
I'm not sure I like where this deduction is going now. I'm afraid it's too late to go back to the Halcyon days of eating too much soap. Sorry guys. But the identity of the guest who was in here last night when the victim passed away is something I have a very bad feeling about. Well, you can try to ignore your feelings, but we cannot ignore the truth, Mr. Naruhodo. No, I suppose not. Time to look around again. Well, there's a candle. Let's look at the candle then. Even Mr. Shamsby didn't eat candles, it seems. We've already established that he didn't eat soap either. Do you think perhaps the guest brought this candle here last night? Even if he or she did, does it reveal anything about the guest's identity? Good point. There goes my idea, snuffed out like that candle will be. If you sigh so deeply, Mr. Naruhodo, you're in danger of blowing out the flame. Well, is there anything else here? Doesn't seem that way. So let's have a look at the broken lock. Oh dear, the latch is most definitely broken, isn't it? The door was kicked in by Mr. Natsume according to what Mr. Garrett told its inspector. He knew that his short, thin little legs had so much strength on them. I'm not sure the length of his legs is in any way significant here. Perhaps this says more about the poor state of the door than about Mr. Natsume's strength, actually. Careful! If he overheard that remark, he'd almost certainly have a lively response. I don't know. Can this broken lock really tell us anything about who was here? No, it can't. Therefore, we are going to look around more. So, we checked here already, didn't we? Yes, there is nothing of interest here. So there is, nothing here, but the books. The books are a bit of a problem, I think, because they point to Mr. Natsume. So let's have a look at the bottle first. It's empty. Empty of liquid, but full of air. That makes you think, doesn't it? Makes me think that you're full of hot air. We should be thinking about who else was in the room at the time. Bother, Susato-san's quip in response was cleverer than my original riddle. Well, what about the pile of books then? At first glance, it seems that the only thing in this room are the makeshift stage and the costumes. I overlooked these 3 books initially. I wonder what they are. Let's see. The titles read The Picture of Monsieur Lecoq, Canterbury Yearnings, and A Meal for Gabariot. Wait, I'm sure I've heard those titles before. It could just be an incredible coincidence, but they're the exact same 3 books that Mr. Natsume purchased the other day. What? Yes, on the day of the unfortunate incident when Miss Green was stabbed, Soseki-san had just been to a bookshop and bought them. That's right. And now those 3 titles are here in the room of the victim. Yet Mr. Natsume claims never to have been here before. What does this mean, do you think? I really don't know what to make of it. So, if you don't remember, the pile of familiar books, we're gonna have a look at them in a second again because I think the dialogue changed. These were crucial in proving the innocence of Mr. Natsume in the first case of the first game. No, it was the third case in the first game. We're gonna have a look at these two again. At first glance, it seems that the only things in this room are the makeshift stage and the costumes. I overlooked these 3 books initially. I wonder what they are. Let's see. The title is read. I can't skip the dialogue, by the way. So that means there is something new. Gabario. Wait, I'm sure I've heard those titles before. It could just be an incredible coincidence. No, it's the same dialogue. It's the same dialogue. We just can't push through because the title of the object changed. So that makes it impossible to... Because I'm clicking like crazy and yeah, I'm sorry guys. Do you think blah blah blah, yeah, what to make of it? So we're gonna present that. Pile of familiar books. Indeed, what reveals the answer, of course, is the pile of familiar books.
Quite so, it's no mere coincidence that these 3 titles are here in this room. It's the link to the truth.
Oh! Mr. Natsume, you purchased these books 4 days ago at the second-hand bookshop. That's just a coincidence.
In that case, you will be able to bring the same 3 titles from your own room, will you not? This very moment.
No, never, non-negotiable. If you can't bring your own copies here, it proves that these 3 books are in fact yours. Having purchased the books 4 days ago and returned to your lodgings, you were arrested the very next day. So you could conceivably have brought the books here on that evening, but you never mentioned that.
In other words, you could only have brought these 3 books here to the victim's room. Last night, having returned to your lodgings after the trial concluded at the Old Bailey. In short, there's only one possible conclusion. The victim died here in his room last night as a result of poisoning.
And that same night, the victim had a visitor.
And that visitor
was you, Mr. Soseki Natsume.
Thus concludes the final act of Sherlock Holmes' Great Deduction.
Soseki Natsume at the scene. Solved. Deduction complete. Elementary. Not again, not again, not again. Not again!
Well then, Mr. Natsume. It would appear you're gonna have to accompany me down to the yard. Again.
But wait! Hold your horses!
Yes?
Door, key, locked! Entry, exit entirely possible! He's so flustered he's being even stranger than normal.
What, you think that's an alibi? You could have just made a copy.
What?
You live in the same building after all. You'd have plenty of opportunity, it seems.
But... Misery me!
Sorry, sir. You'll get your chance to give your side of the story later. The facts speak for themselves, Mr. Mustache.
You're a horrible Herlock Sholmes! He really has found himself an arch rival now, hasn't he?
Come on now. No dilly-dallying. Outside there's a carriage waiting.
Welcome to Mr. Naruhodo Esquire! I never imagined I'd be in this position again, but... You have to help me! Please! I'm innocent! Alright, I understand. We'll come to your cell later and talk about it. And one more thing! Oh, yes? My poor little kitty cat. Please give him his breakfast for me! And so, his evil curse still apparently unbroken, Soseki-san found himself once again the prime suspect in a case of murder. Thanks to the incriminating deduction of the great detective.
My dear fellow, that honor belongs to you.
Well, at least that means Inspector Gregson is no longer here. We can examine the crime scene in more detail now. Yes, that's right. And of course... What? Have you forgotten what the inspector mentioned before? It was the landlord, Mr. Garridap, who discovered Mr. Shamspeare. Mr. John Garridap, yes. I expect we could find him in his sitting room on the top floor as usual. Right, we must remember to go and talk to him later then. But before we do that, we are going to examine this. We do still have some time, so we're gonna examine the room a little bit. Look at these extravagant bright costumes. Somehow they look out of place in this room with its grim shady goings on. This one looks like a king's attire. A king? I've always dreamt of being a king. I think you'd be more suited for a feudal lord, a daimyo or such like. With a con mage top knot. Every Japanese man wishes he had a con mage. You look wonderful with your... Sorry guys. And you already have the sword. Can you imagine what would happen if I walked around the streets of London with a con mage and a sword? Wouldn't be very pleasant, I guess. Okay, let's look at the shelves. There's not much on these shelves, is there? Just the wine glass and bottle. And both of them are cracked. Yes, not much use, are they? What's the matter? I was just reminded of the Reaper, that's all. Prosecutor Lord von Zeeks? Yes, he's so reckless with his wine glasses. I was thinking it's a waste and that he should donate some to the needy. You can suggest it next time we meet. Nice little hint there. Oh, there is something on the... What is this? What's this? It looks like a part of an envelope, I think. Yes, I think you may be right. Perhaps it was torn off when the letter was opened. Is that significant? Well, it's a little out of place, perhaps. When you look around the room, there's no sign of a letter or the rest of the envelope in the fact, is there? She's right. And yet, here we have the torn off end of an envelope. It just strikes me as unusual. I agree. We'd better take this, just in case. Torn off end of envelope. A ripped off piece of an envelope that was found in Mr. Shamspeare's room. The rest of the envelope could not be located. Well, let's head into the court record immediately and examine this little piece. I can't find anything out of place. Okay, but... we can examine this, whoever opened this envelope didn't bother with a letter opener or scissors, did they? Yes, whoever opened it was clearly someone with an unrefined temperament. And judging from the angle of the rip here, the person in question must have been right-handed. Aha! Mr. Sato, I think perhaps someone's been reading too much of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. You can never read too much of it, Mr. Naruhodo. Never! Uh-huh. Anything else of interest? Doesn't seem to be the case. Alright. So, we're gonna keep that in mind. There was apparently a right-handed person involved. So let's have a look at the lamp. This is a gas wall light, isn't it? It must be connected to a gas pipe in the wall. Gas lights? Gas stove? London really is a city of gas. But now that I think about it, Mr. and Mrs. Garadab had an open fire on the top floor, didn't they? Oh yes, you're right. I don't recall seeing a gas stove up there. Well, I much prefer a real fire anyway. It's so much cozier. Uh-huh, you're the cozy one, Ryunosuke, aren't you? Alright, let's have a look at this. And here we have another disproportionately large machine. This looks like a meter of some kind. Ah, this is a gas meter, I think. It seems that in this district, residents pay for gas as they use it with coins. Ah, I see. Yes, now you've pointed it out. I can see that there's a slot just here that looks like it would take a coin. So you mean if you put a coin in here? That's right. That would buy you about 2 hours of gas for lights and heating. So, if you were a poor person with no money, you'd have to sleep in the freezing cold? Yes, or if you were a scatterbrain with no change because you forgot to exchange your money at the bank. Thank goodness there's no meter in our office. Well, before we take a look at the corpse, let's have a look at the window. As we've seen from the outside, the window is completely bricked up. A vestige of the former window tax, that Britons had to pay. What strange things they used to tax in Great Britain. I mean, making people pay for the number of windows they had in a property, it's extraordinary. It's heartbreaking to think of the poor having to block up their windows just to evade an unaffordable tax. Oh, what is it, Mr. Sato? If you look closely, a number of the bricks are loose. Uh-huh. There's more soap. Oh yes, it looks as though an amateur has broken out a few of them just here. Was it Mr. Shamsbury who did it, I wonder, being the lodger renting this room? Oh, look at this, Mr. Naruhodo. On the outside there's a little ledge. And there's something on it. What? Outside? So we can have a look again. We're gonna do that, of course. Brr, it's so cold outside. You can feel it through this gap. It did snow all last night. It would be cold, but more importantly, what is it on the ledge out there? What are those snow-covered lumps? It's more bars of soap. Soap? What are bars of soap doing lined up on the ledge outside the window? I have no idea, but the pair of them look rather charming like that. Still, that's very strange, isn't it? Bars of soap lined up outside the window? I think perhaps we should take one. There are two after all. Oh dear, I suppose we could. Oh, what's this? Look here at this soap. Ah. Do you see in the middle there? There's a patch that's a different color. It's sort of transparent, but some sort of fancy design, I suppose, only in Great Britain. It looks like the Hinomaru flag of Japan, doesn't it? How wonderful. It's probably a very expensive brand. Expensive? Then what's it doing in this ramshackle old room? The bar of soap has been entered in the court record. Alright, so we're gonna have a look at those immediately, of course. What is this? This part is of different colors and exquisite design, isn't it? Trust the British to turn a boring bar of soap into something special. I quite like it. It reminds me of the Hinomaru design of the Japanese flag. I expect this is rather expensive soap. That doesn't seem likely given who it belongs to. I mean, okay, we can't check out what it is, but it's very strange indeed. Nothing else peculiar about this. Okay, so we have to hurry up. We breached the half-hour mark already, but I want to end this episode. I don't want to end this episode just like this. We haven't finished the investigation. This is some sort of makeshift stage, I think, isn't it? Where does the audience sit, though, for the nightly Shakespeare performance? Actors aspiring to the great stage must practice their art, Mr. Naruto, with or without an audience. In fact, on a related note, perhaps you should set up a mock bench for the defense in your office. What? Then you could practice your art every single day. I'll think about it, if you promise to don a beard and play the role of the judge. Well, if that would help you, you achieve your goal. This I have to see. Okay, wasn't as funny though. There were better puns, but it was still a good one. So we have checked out everything, I think. Yes, we did. There's nothing left besides the calls, so let's check out the calls. Oh, the poor man, so young to die. Do you suppose it was a very painful death, being poisoned as he was? I don't know. All we can do now is hope that he'll be reborn to a better life. Yes, I suppose you're right. I wonder... Do you think that putting our hands together in a Japanese prayer will help a British soul? Sorry? I made sure I had a reference at the ready for just such an equation as this actually. This book is entitled The Beginner's Guide to Praying for the Departed, the British Way. I'll just reread it now. One moment. There's quite a spine on that book, isn't there? Okay, oh, so that was nothing. Alright, so we checked out everything, we got some clues, which is very nice, but a new location has been added. Alright, we could go to Briar's, Garrydeb's room, or the prison, but next episode we are going to Mr. Garrydeb's room, for sure. Mr. and Mrs. Garrydeb's room. So, we have breached the half-hour mark already, quite some actually. So thanks so much for watching, guys. If you want to know how the investigation is going to unfold, you'll have to tune in next time for the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles Resolve. See you then.